Hi friends and welcome. My name is Anna Helman and this is my 9th video in my series to help you get introduced to card making easily. This is such an amazing hobby, but I've heard from so many people who get overwhelmed when you're looking at all the products and all the techniques and all the crazy complicated cards. This is fun and it doesn't have to be complicated, so I'm making this series to help you get introduced to it. Today, we are going to look at 6 simple beginning level card making techniques. We are going to make 2 cards in just a few minutes using these fun techniques that you can try on your projects at home. At the end, we always talk about life. I try to offer something encouraging to you. Today's chat is going to be about wellness and health issues and the fact that I believe there's a cure for everything. And I'm going to share some resources with you if you're looking for answers to some kind of health issue, some ideas of some things you might be able to look into. We're going to make these cards with this beautiful sketched butterflies stamp set. This is the type of stamp set I recommend for beginning stampers because it has nice images. It also has an assortment of greetings for different occasions. So let's get into these fun and simple techniques. Now this first one we're going to use to create a really neat background, and this is called block stamping. So instead of applying ink to our project with a stamp, we're actually going to apply it using an acrylic block. So I am going to bring in 2 markers, and the colors I have here are Petal Pink and Calypso Coral. When you do this, if you're using multiple colors of ink, which you don't have to, you can just use 1 color if you want. But if you use 2 colors, I encourage you to apply the lighter color first and the darker color second. That way, if this marker soaks up any of that color from that first marker I used, it's okay because the lighter color was on first. I wouldn't want my Petal Pink dark marker to soak up ink from my darker marker. So what I'm going to do now is I have a water spritzer here. Now, if you don't have any of these supplies, a lot of times you can substitute. So maybe you, instead of spritzing water on using this, maybe you get some water on your fingertips and you can flick it onto the block itself. So the tools I'm showing are really nice, and over time you may want to add these things to your collection. But if you don't have them at the beginning, don't worry. A lot of times there is a way to substitute. So what I'm going to do now is just apply that to my piece of cardstock for my project, and you can see how that ink has soaked into the piece of paper here. So we're getting a really fun background, right? I will mention I have some scrap paper here, and then this is a thin foam pad. This is called my Stampin' Pierce mat. It really helps since, give it a little cushion since I'm stamping with the actual block. Now, I'm going to do this a second time, so if you're gonna try this, if there's any water left, you may want to clean that off with a chamois, whatever you use to clean off your stamps, just to make sure that water doesn't get into the markers. So we'll do this a second time. I'll color that Petal Pink color on. And now I'll add the Calypso Coral. I am just giving it 2 spritzes. There have been times in the past I've done this with, I've used more, just depends on how much blending you want to get. And I was debating whether to put the dark at the top this time or at the bottom. I'll switch back. We'll go this way so the dark is at the top on both of them. Now I'm just going to set this aside and let it dry, and we are going to get started on the other card. So I'll bring in my plain white cardstock for this one. And we are going to use a blending brush. This is a tool that I absolutely love. If you don't have blending brushes, maybe you have some sponges or some sponge daubers. You can try the same technique. They don't blend quite as well as with the blending brushes, but I just wanted to share with you a way to use these. And here I have a piece of cardstock that has a square cut out. Now I cut this out with a die and my die cutting machine, but you could create something like this with punches. You can even do this with a trimmer and just cut the inside out. So I am going to lay this on my card project and attempt to center it. Now sometimes when I do this, I'll use some washi tape or some kind of removable adhesive to hold everything in place. Sometimes I just use my hand and try to keep a good hold on it so it doesn't move around. But we'll put a little bit of tape up here to help hold everything in place. Here I have some crumb cake ink. This is my brown blending brush that I use for all the brown colors. I am going to swirl it while it's in contact with the ink pad to pick up some ink. Now I'm going to just dab it a little bit on my scrap paper to get off any excess ink that might be on there. And I'll start off the edge, swirling, and slowly move in. If you try blending and you find that you're getting darker areas and it's not blending as well as you want it to, make sure you're dabbing that extra ink on your scrap paper, and make sure you're starting off the edge and slowly blending onto your project with just a little bit of pressure. As you want to make it darker, you can press harder. You can also pick up more ink from that ink pad. And just a little tip when you're using blending brushes, what I find is that the color is always more noticeable. It's always darker and more noticeable than I think it's going to be. So as I'm looking at this right now, it's like, wow, that's really light. You can barely see that, but we'll even it out just a little bit, the areas that are lighter. So it looks really light, but let's go ahead and remove this and see what it looks like. That's a lot more noticeable than it looked like just a moment ago, right? Okay, so that is our first technique, is blending with blending brushes. Now, here's a fun technique. I'll bring in 2 ink pads and the stamp that I'm going to use. So I am going to use this butterfly stamp, and I have it mounted to my acrylic block here. This technique is called rolling. So anytime you can stamp with multiple colors, it really adds a special touch to your projects. So that is what our butterfly looks like if we stamp it in one color, boho blue. And let me show you what we're going to do. So I inked it in my lighter color, my boho blue. Now I'm going to choose a darker color of the same color group. So I have Night of Navy. You would not want to do this with different colors completely, because the lighter color of ink is going to soak a little bit into the darker ink pad. Because they're both blue, it's not going to cause a problem. So the technique is called rolling, and what I'm going to do is just roll the edges of this stamp in that darker ink pad. Now I am going to stamp this, and I'm actually going to stamp twice with a technique called stamping off that I love to use a lot. If you've been watching along with my videos, you see me do this a lot. So I'm going to stamp once here, and hopefully you can see that lighter in the center and darker on the edges. And now I'm going to stamp a second time up here to get that faded effect. So I'll raise this up a little bit and see, hopefully you can see that color variation. And now we are going to use one more technique to stamp the greeting onto this card. So here's a stamp from the set. It says, "Hope is a beautiful thing that flutters in the soul." So I thought this would be a good example. Now this is a beautiful greeting. It goes great with the butterflies. But let's say you wanted to use this stamp on another set where the last part of it doesn't really make sense. Like, you don't want to use it with butterflies. You're just going to use it on a card with trees or leaves or flowers. And you don't want this last part that says "that flutters in the soul." So here is a really simple way to remove part of a stamp that you don't want to use on your project. I am using some Scotch tape, and I'm covering up the part that I don't want. So I have taped off that bottom half. I only have the first 2 lines visible. So I will ink it up. And now I am going to remove this tape. So we only have ink on the top 2 lines, and it should be ready to stamp. Perfect, right? So we could use, this can really help you to extend the use of your stamps. Maybe you want to remove a certain part of an image stamp, or maybe it's words from a greeting stamp, but this can really help you get more use out of some, especially those greeting stamps that maybe you just want to use 1 or 2 words from them, or maybe you want to remove a portion like what we just did on this one. So I already have my card base prepared. If you would like to recreate these, my card base measured 5.5 by 8.5, and then I folded it in half. The darker, the navy piece measures 4 by 5.25. The white pieces measure 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And these measurements are the same for the second card we will create here. Let's add a couple of embellishments while it's here, and then we will finish up that other card. So here's my take your pick tool. I love to use the sticky end on this for applying gems to my projects. It really makes it simple to do it. And we will add these 3. And we have a really simple card with some fun basic techniques. Now let's bring this other piece back in. It is still just barely damp, but I think we can move on with our project. Now, if you try this and you want it to dry faster, you can use a heat tool. I've talked about a heat tool for heat embossing, or a hair dryer, and that will dry it a little bit faster for you. So we did the block stamping. The next technique we are going to try involves markers again, and we'll use this other butterfly stamp on this one. So we are going to use markers to color ink onto the stamp, and this will allow us to get multiple colors on this same stamp. So similar to the rolling technique, but with this one we get to put those colors exactly where we want them. So when I do this, I like to hold my marker horizontal. So this allows me to cover more area at one time, and it also protects the tip of the marker so that I don't damage it. So what I like to do is get the lightest color that I'm going to use and apply that first. I don't have to apply it everywhere. I just need to make sure I get the areas covered where I want that color. Then the next color, we want to save the darkest for last. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of this darker pink in the centers near the butterfly's body, and coming in just a little bit from the outside. And then I'm going to apply my darkest color, my Blackberry Bliss, in the center and on the edges of the wings. So my 3 colors, they are Calypso Coral, Berry Burst, and then this one is Blackberry Bliss. So I'll put this right in here on the body and the antenna, and out here on the edges of the wings. So this is kind of a fun way just to add a level of detail. It's a great way to use markers when you have them in your collection. So we have those colors on here. Let's go ahead and stamp. Now, when you do this, something to keep in mind is the colors are going to turn out a little bit lighter than they would if you inked on an ink pad. So isn't that a neat technique with that watercolor looking background? And then we have this really cool effect. This is an interesting stamp anyway, because it has that sketched effect, but then when we add the different colors to it with the markers, turns out just really beautiful. Let's pull in our greeting. We'll stamp our greeting, and then I will show you the third technique that we are going to use on this card. So here's Thinking of You stamp. We'll stamp this down, and this is where you can play around with your placement. I had thought I would put it in the center, and now I'm thinking it might be fun to put it over here off to the side a little bit. Okay, now for our third technique, I wanted to show you another way to use your markers, and it is to add some faux stitching, just fake stitching around the edge of your card. So this is something, you could do this around the edge of the actual project. You can do this around the edge of maybe a punch or a die cut or your greeting tag. You can go all the way around, like I said, or you can just do portions. So let's just do a few areas. We'll do down here. And this is one of those things you want to wait until it's all done to see how it comes together. As you are doing card making, I really encourage you to focus on the positive and not look at the things that are imperfect. If you look at this stitching, it is not perfect at all, friends. It's not perfect at all. But no one is going to pick and choose one little stitch to focus on that does not look right. We're going to look at the completed project as a whole. So let's put this on this card base that I've prepared. Like I said, the measurements for this one are the same as they were for the blue card that we created. You may want some extra adhesive on these. The paper did warp just a little bit. You probably want to use high quality paper with the technique with the water, with the block stamping. It warped just a little bit, so you may want some extra adhesive in the center. Let's add a few gems to this one. And then we will take a look at these two completed cards. So here you can see this one up close with the block stamping, using markers to ink your stamp, and using markers to add some faux stitching around the edges. Here is the other card that we created with the blending, the rolling technique to get multiple colors on your stamp, and using that tape to mask off part of your greeting. Hope you enjoyed seeing these. I'll flip my camera around, let's chat. So let's talk for a minute about my belief that there is probably a cure for every health problem out there. So my wellness journey officially started about 1.5 years ago. I had struggled with some really annoying health problems. I was finally tired of being tired of not feeling good. I'd had allergy and sinus problems very badly for a long time. I'd had some nutrient deficiencies. The first one I found out about was iron. At a later time, I was deficient in potassium. Wow, nutrient deficiencies can ruin your life when you feel terrible and have zero energy. So there were some other things. I got sick a lot. Overall, I was told I was healthy, I was fine, everything was great, but I didn't feel good and I was tired of it. I'm not old enough for that, We're never old enough for that, but I knew I was not old enough for that. So I discovered this diet. It is called the GAPS diet. I've been on it for almost a year and a half now, but I found that the way the diet works is it heals your digestive system, it heals your gut. And by healing your gut, it heals people of all kinds of health problems, mental problems, physical problems, all over the board. This diet has been around, I think, for almost 100 years. It was originally used for mental health purposes, but it also heals physical problems. It heals food intolerances. There are people who cannot eat dairy or grains or peanut butter or whatever it is. And by doing this diet, it heals your digestive system. And then you can go back in a lot of cases to eating these things because your body is working right. The food is not the problem. The way our bodies work are usually the problem. So finding out about the GAPS diet and starting that was kind of like the official beginning of my wellness journey. I've been interested in natural health, natural healing for a long time. But this is when I officially dove in and started learning about a lot of things. I started doing a lot of reading. And I want to give you just a short list of a few things that if you are searching for answers to health problems or not feeling good or whatever it is, I want to give you some ideas of places to look. As I've started getting into this, then I start finding all these other things. And it's really interesting to me. The diet I'm on is one thing that has healed a lot of people of a lot of things. Then there's another diet I'm aware of that is completely different. And it has healed a lot of people of a lot of things. So when I learned about this, these two diets in particular were some of the first ones. This is where I first started questioning, like, well, how can this diet work and this diet work? And they're so different. Like, is the one I'm on wrong? And I had to come to terms with this. And then I start learning about these other things. These, in a lot of cases, they're diets that heal people. And where I have come to, what I have come to believe with all of this is there are a lot of ways to heal. We have to find one of them. I truly believe our bodies were created to be well. Our bodies were created to heal themselves when we treat them right. So here are a few things you can look up, and I'm not an expert on all of these, but I'll just mention a few. So the diet I am on is GAPS, Gut and Psychology Syndrome is what it stands for, or Gut and Physiology Syndrome. It stands for both of them. I encourage you, if you really want to know about them, to read the books. Sometimes you can find good information on websites if you find the right websites, but a lot of times you'll find this like health website that is reporting on the GAPS diet and it hasn't been proven to be scientifically effective or whatever. Well, there's thousands and thousands of people that it's changed their lives. So if you can find like blogs and people's personal stories to report on these things, that's where I would suggest. There are also tons of groups in your favorite social media site. Search the group section for these things or specific health problems that you may have, and and look for ones that may have more natural options as far as healing instead of just trying to tolerate whatever health problem you have, which is often what doctors tell people they have to do. So the GAPS diet is one to take a look at. The specific carbohydrate diet is very similar to the one I'm on, but it's different and it has worked for a lot of people. Autoimmune protocol is another diet. Autoimmune diseases are skyrocketing, where your body attacks itself. It thinks that something inside of you is the enemy, and your immune system is constantly trying to attack it. One of the things I found out that I need to deal with is my amalgam fillings in my teeth. Boy, I wish when I asked my dentist several years back about the two different kinds and what he recommended, boy, I wish somebody would have told me that these were going to release mercury into my body forever and I should get the other type. Nobody told me that. But that can be something I've read in a book on thyroid health and healing your thyroid naturally, that amalgam fillings are a huge problem and your body is trying to attack what's being released and causes issues. So anyway, the autoimmune protocol, there's so many autoimmune diseases. It's becoming a huge thing. I believe diagnosis of autoimmune diseases is probably going to go nowhere but up. So the autoimmune protocol is one to take a look at. Gerson therapy, I believe, was the story of Gerson therapy is just fascinating. These people, he was a doctor, but he discovered it by accident. But it's used for cancer treatment, and I believe, I'm not an expert on it, but I believe heals all kinds of other things as well. Dry fasting or water fasting, where you give your body a break from food for a while, it's in the Bible. People used it in the Bible when they were preparing for some of the hardest things they were going to go through. I don't know if it talks about using it for health purposes in the Bible, but friends, I believe our bodies were created to heal themselves. And sometimes maybe we just need to do is take a little break from all the food we shove in our faces all the time, right? I've just found out recently, I've been doing some reading, that a lot of our problems may just come from overeating, that we're just piling too much food into our digestive systems and they need a break. So anyway, fasting, water fasting, dry fasting, these were things I read that there used to be fasting clinics here in the US. I have not fact checked this, but it was in a book that I read that I loved. That fasting clinics were shut down a long time ago. And the person who was in charge of like the medical system or whatever at that time, his quote was, basically, they're going to put us out of business. They're going to take away all of our patients from our doctor's offices. It's hilarious, right? It's not funny at all. So look up fasting if you're interested. And I've been talking to a friend. I know somebody who is struggling with Parkinson's disease right now. It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking to see these things. And a friend who is all on board with natural healing and things, I was talking to her about this, and I'm like, Parkinson's is one thing I haven't seen anywhere that this treatment has helped with Parkinson's, or this natural therapy, whatever, has helped with it. And then not very long after that, I somewhere saw this reference to combo therapy, KAMBO. It is poison from a frog that is used kind of like a natural vaccine. It was the information that I saw just briefly. I don't know a lot about this, friends. I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you to do these things. If you are searching for answers, I am trying to give you some places to look and some things to start looking up. Books, friends, read books. Search your local library. If you don't know how, walk in the door, ask them how to help you search for books. And search not just your library. I know our state has a system where I can request books from anywhere in the state. They deliver them to my library. I can do it all from my handy app on my phone. I love it. I know how to search and find things. So if I'm searching for a certain health problem, I can just look up. I did this a while back with thyroid after I found out my thyroid wasn't working right. So I just searched the word thyroid in my app to see what books are out there on thyroid. I found the ones that were more towards the natural healing side, and I started reading them. So I know health problems, both mental and physical, have become so so devastating to so many people. And I want to share the things I'm finding that have helped me and may help you as well. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.